sacrifice forever perfect. Your praise unceasing, you are worthy. Faithful through tribulation, you are faithful. Your love unmoved, just like the mountains. Forever with us, you are faithful. We bring an offering of praise to you. Our circumstances don't determine what's due. Through joy and tragedy, you're faithful and true. Oh, we bring our praise. We bring our praise to you. We bring our praise. Creator, Savior, you are sovereign.
Good evening, everyone. For those still hanging around, if you can come and grab a seat, we're close to starting.
You bring the dead to life, you're sovereign. We bring an offering of praise to you. Our circumstances don't determine what's due. Through joy and tragedy, you're faithful and true. Oh, we bring our praise. We bring our praise to you. Calling the nations, every tribe and every living thing to worship you. This one obsession, one fixation we're created for. To worship you. In every storm, in every fire, purify our hearts. To worship you. This is our joy, this is our full and generous reward. To worship.
All right, we're going to start in about 2 minutes. You guys can
We bring an offering
less than 2 minutes.
praise to you. Our circumstances don't determine what's due. Through joy and tragedy, you're faithful and true. Oh, we bring our praise. We bring our praise to you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 5th episode of Storytellers. Welcome to the guys also streaming in. It's lovely to have you guys with us and everyone who's present here. It's nice to see your faces again. This evening, we have a very special couple with us again. Many of you know them because normally Ross would preach at you guys, or would preach, you'll see him at his capacity within the church, but tonight we have the privilege of listening to their story and how they came to this point. So welcome Ross and Magriet. It's really wonderful to have you here. Welcome. Perhaps as we start out, I thought it would be a cool idea if you guys could just share perhaps what you currently do, and would also be cool to maybe share a fun fact that no one would know about you. So Magriet, you can go for it.
Good evening. It's really nice to be here. So I'm Magriet. I'm the one you never see, especially at night because I'm at home with the kids. So I'm married to Ross. I'm a mom of two lovely kids, 9 and 6 years old. I'm also a pediatrician. I'm also studying a little bit further at the moment. A fun fact about myself. Just after school, I was part of a dance and drama arts diploma year. And we toured around the country. We did a lot of training and a lot of things on stage. And I was given the role of being the clown at school functions. So they would literally take a size 46 men's pants and stuff me and 3 or 4 pillows into it. And then literally load me into the car because I couldn't bend my knees. Obviously, you see I've got a height dysfunction. So the pillows would come up to here. And then 2 people would pull from the front and 2 people would push from the back. And then they would load me into the car and drive to the nearest primary school. And then they would push me out. And I would entertain the kids.
And some of the adults, I believe. Ross, I thought you were the clown in the relationship at times, but no, apparently not.
No, definitely not. Hello, I'm Ross. I'm, yes, I got to know Magriet during a clown year. So that's my brother and Magriet were together in this drama year. So that's how I got to know Magriet.
And he still married me.
That's why I married you. You're very funny. Anyway, van Niekerk, funny. Anyway, so I something interesting. So you saw in the pictures, I have 2 brothers. I'm the middle of 3 brothers. We're 2 years apart, so we grew up very close. Most of my school years in Gauteng. But like a fun fact about me, most of you know that I was in the Air Force for a long time as an engineer. But I was also a DJ for a while. I DJ'd Mati FM for 2.5 years. I was the classic FM. So goeiemôre, Ross van Niekerk hier so met Mati FM, klassiek op Sondag. That was me. So no one listened to that. So only my friends who would make prank calls to the studio at that time. So I had 1 or 2 of my most embarrassing moments where it's still BC days, so where I would tell my friends to get off the air, and I didn't notice that the microphone in the house was on. So it was 1 or 2 very embarrassing moments where the old tunnies would phone in and struggle a little bit with the language that I used. Yeah.
That is also very enlightening. Okay, Magriet, perhaps you can share a bit more about where you grew up and what your household was like.
So I've got a mom and a dad and 1 brother. He's 3 years younger than me. We started out, my dad's also studied at Tygerberg University. So we started, my mom actually as well. So we started off here and then moved to Windhoek for most of my life. I did all my primary school years in Windhoek. And then from there on, I moved back to South Africa to study.
Okay, and your mom and dad, doctors, GPs, what do they do?
So my dad's also a pediatrician. My mom was a sister, but she stopped working when we arrived. I think I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So part of my story that I actually want to share with you tonight starts way in the beginning. So my mom and dad couldn't have kids. They couldn't naturally conceive for medical reasons. So my brother and I, we were adopted. We are not related by blood. And my adopted mom, or my biological mom, actually gave me up for adoption before I was born. So I was lucky enough never to go to a foster home or anything like that. My parents actually picked me up right when I was discharged from hospital, so I never knew other home. But it's also one of obviously the most defining things in my life was the fact that I was adopted. I have an amazing family. You saw some of them there, and usually when I tell my story, I bring all my pictures along. On my dad's side, he's only got one sister, but my aunt has really become like another mother, and I've got 3 cousins on that side. And then on the other side, I've got a really large extended family. We're all very, very close. And it's really such a privilege to be part of such a family. I've never felt out or other or not accepted. I'm treated exactly the same as everybody else. I've got amazing aunts and grandfathers and grandmothers, and I've really been privileged to grow up in a family where God is loved and God is served literally for generations. There's even a song that was written years ago that blesses the family and blesses the generations to come, and it even includes literally in the writing of the song that the adopted or those that are brought into the family. So when we have kids in the church or when we have people that adopt, it's always such a privilege for me to be there, because I really feel that one of the biggest things that God has ever done in my life was really secure my identity in who I am right at the moment that I was born. I was born into a family where I was completely 100% accepted, and that when I later accepted Christ into my life, it's exactly the same relationship I have with God. I don't feel other. I don't feel that there's a moment that he doesn't love me or doesn't want the best for me. I've really got amazing parents who don't live for themselves. They live for others and to serve others. And especially my father's heart toward me has really given me such an understanding of God's love. And we often have discussions about it, that the way I approach God is different from other people, because I have a father, earthly father, my father Johan, where his hand is always open. I can literally ask him anything. With all my studies, with everything I've gone through, I just have these pictures of when we needed him when I was studying and Nathan was very ill, that he would literally come and he would take my son at night and he would have vomit all over him as he walked through the night so that I could sleep. Or he would come and get Magriet and he would take her with him. There was just nothing he wouldn't do for me. So I'm so blessed to be in that place, that I'm so sure of where I am, who I am, and that the Father that I serve in heaven and on earth, I just have such a profound picture of his love. So when I approach God, I'm very sure that he wants the best for me. There's nothing that he doesn't want. Yes, he'll say no because he's God and he knows best, but in his hearts of hearts, he's always towards me.
Sure, that is really amazing, Magriet. And I've had the privilege of meeting your parents, and it's always in a context where they've driven from either Somerset West or Stilbaai to be here and to be present with the kids and with you guys, which is a wonderful privilege. If you could perhaps share with the people in our audience maybe some memories that shaped your view of yourself being accepted, and just memories from perhaps when you were a kid, the earliest things you can remember that you knew that you were loved by the family that you were in.
So my parents never made a secret of it. We knew from the start that we were adopted. And they actually made it quite elaborate. My mom would tell me that they waited 7 years for me. So I was really prayed for and loved. And literally the whole family prayed for me to come. And they were waiting. They were all waiting. And on the one side, I was the first grandchild. So I was spoiled rotten by my grandparents on that side. So that was probably my first memories. Just like, we waited for you. My mom would always say, other people, they have to kind of take what they get. we could really choose and we could wait, and we had to wait very long for you. I know other people also struggle, if they struggle with pregnancy, there's such an expectation if that child comes in the end. So I think that's the one thing. And then back in the days, we still did the foundation encounters 4, where you do deliverance and work through things. And they kept on trying to get something from me about my adoption. You know, there must be something you need to be delivered of. And then I was like, dude, I'm really fine about it. I'm actually, I think I'm better off than you, because I actually know I'm loved. I don't have issues with my parents. I know where I came from, and I'm very sure about myself. And he's like, no, we must pray more. And at the end, God actually revealed Romans 8:15 to him. That the fact that I know that I've got the spirit of adoption, God's already revealed it to me in the natural, is why I don't have issues with my adoption. So whenever I'm involved in adoptions and things, that's the one thing I pray for kids, even for my own, that they will know the spirit of adoption and not wonder about these things.
That's powerful. Yeah, so, and you said it shaped also, it was a big role of your identity and growing up. So if you had to share with someone else, how it shaped the way that you view yourself, the fact that you were adopted, perhaps something that the penny dropped, what would it be? I hope it makes sense, the question, how adoption shaped your identity.
So obviously I was, as studying medicine and being a doctor, and I often get confronted about the fact that people still have abortions and go through it. And I had to deal with that at one stage. As a student, I had to really come to the knowledge that my biological mom could have aborted me. That would have been the easy way out. Sorry. And just to know that she didn't do it because God didn't allow it. Because he changes, he's the one that redeems. He changes where we come from, our heritage. He completely changes it. There's nothing that he can't redeem. And he sets our legacy up for us. Our destiny changes. I usually have the nicest pictures. I could have been just nothing. There could have been no life. But if you see my family where I am now, and I'm so awesomely privileged to be there, and my church family, the community I'm in, where I work, and my kids, and the legacy I'm leaving in them, but not just in them, in everybody that I work with, in all the patients that I see, in all the colleagues that I work with. God redeems. He changes. There's nothing that he can't change. There's nothing that he can't redeem and make new. And he literally brings in abundance. He brings you to a place of abundance. So that's, except for the identity, that's really a thing that God can really do anything. He can really stop, and he can really change, and he can really make new.
Sure. Oh, that's really wonderful. I think just reflecting on that personally, in my own life, the fact that we are adopted also as God's children, in an adoption you leave something behind, but it's way better what you receive. And in my own life, sometimes I look back to the things that I left behind. But in your story, it's just a wonderful that the realization of what you are saved into, the inheritance, the legacy. It's more than what we're saved out of, but it's greater, our salvation, what we are saved into. So we are. I'm going to get back to that, Magriet. Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing. Something that I didn't know, and that Ross mentioned casually as well, is that, Ross, you too were adopted.
Yeah. So I was born in 1977 as Ros van Roskutsia. So I was born as Roskutsia grew up in the Northern Cape with my two brothers and my mom and my dad. Happy days, innocent days, playful days, and then my dad suddenly passed away. They went to Kimberley. He just suddenly died. Was a surprise. He was struggling with headaches, and it was He had bleeding on the brain and eventually passed away. So we just, the woman Tani that we were staying with for the weekend, we didn't know. My mom and dad went to the hospital in Bloemfontein, just told us that your papa's now in the hemel, your dad is in heaven now, and you know that. What do you do with that? And then the roller coaster happened. For the next few years, we literally, a few weeks later, we moved to Johannesburg, to the big city. Grew up in Kempton Park, from this northern Cape, small plattelandse place where mom was the creche in town, and dad was the engineer on the manager on the mine. So then changed big. I looked at my first few years as a boy. You know, your grade 1, grade 2, and standard 1, grade 3 pictures, and I looked terrible. It's like I looked terrible. I had no. I don't remember any. I don't remember much. I mean, we stayed in that first house for 3 years. I don't remember anything of my first 6 years. I have a bit a regression. I think the trauma was a bit too much. Neither me or my brothers remember much. We all wonder whether we made up the memories of the few pictures we had back then. You know, those pictures that the color pictures, but they just look brown, you know. Those, what do we call those? Philip, you know what we do call those photos? Sepia photos, yeah. And and then so somewhere, I think in the standard 1, my mom remarried. My mom was beautiful. So when we moved there, maybe just a picture, I always look at these ladies in church that are 30, and I thought, when my mom was 30, I was 6, Garth was 4, and my older brother Conrad was 8. And then she moved as a single mom at the age 30 to Johannesburg with 3 kids, and she had to just start a new career and a new everything just to care for us. But yeah, and so my mom was she still is beautiful. Maar sy's mooi, soos regtig mooi. Yeah.
She was confused as his wife this morning again, so.
Yeah. It's like, is this your sister? No, this is not my sister. This is my mom. Anyway, so so my mom remarried, and yes, and I think that was one of the greatest gifts God could ever give me. For me and my brothers and my mom, it was just a dad again, a man in the house. Because I remember I had a stomach ulcer in grade 1 and grade 2. I was struggling with anxiety. You know, I had to talk to a woman. But now, looking back, obviously I had to go to a psychologist, a child psychologist. But this woman wanted me to talk about pictures. And what do you see in this ink blotches? I'm like, this is a butterfly. This is an ugly butterfly. This is a really ugly butterfly. Yes. And I had to write stories. Well, obviously now, in retrospect, you know what it was. But just the order, because when Willem married my mom, he also said, no, he wants to adopt us. He wants to not just be stepdad forever. He wants to adopt us. He wants to act like a father to us. And it was amazing. It was an incredible gift to us. So life became ordered slowly. It was stormy, obviously, in the beginning, because now we had 3 boys in the house who wanted to know, who's this man? It's talking to my mom like that. You know, it's like, because it was a bit stormy coming together, these 2 families. And so primary school was still a bit of a haze. I don't have many memories. But I think at the end of primary school, beginning high school, my life just became, you know, he brought security, and that was the gift of God. Discipline, order, security. And I think that's still the one legacy that I have of the gift of Willem in my house. It's like, it's just a discipline, order, security. So it's a framework, a father who sets framework to us. And I think the story from then on in my life is actually being fathered by God, you know. It's like, because I know what the story could have been had my mom not married anyone, and the 3 of us grew up teenagers, boys, big men that never had order or structure in the house. So that's sort of the story. Can I tell a little bit more, Theo? Okay, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see a question in your face, so I'm just gunning for it. Yeah, and I think, so high school, so security, primary school, order, stability, peace in the house. High school, significance. I for the first time, really, I discovered who I was. And that's actually why I got born again. My dad, Willem, took us to this new church. Not a new church, just that we came to a different church. He just was prompted to take us to this evangelical church. And the gospel was preached by a Dominee Ferreira in such a straight way. that I got born again that evening. I remember actually, there was a time before that I heard the Lord calling me to salvation. My mom took us to a Pentecostal church. My dad wouldn't go to a Pentecostal church back then, but my mom took us to a Pentecostal church. And I remember sitting at the end of the sermon, sitting and holding onto my chair when the pastor, was making an altar call. And I was so afraid to go forward. I was so afraid to go forward because I was so ashamed, like I'm going to be embarrassed and stuff. And he was calling and my heart was thumping and I was emotional and holding onto my chairs. I'm so afraid. So I didn't go forward that day, but I did go forward 2 or 3 years later when Dominic Ferreira and his wife led me to the Lord that evening. And I got to know Jesus. That's the moment in my life when I got to know Jesus as Savior. And high school was great. Then the next phase of my life, leaving school, going to the Air Force was good. I think I became a young man then, Air Force year, and 5 years of studies. The first one was just repeated a little bit. So you don't want to rush through a degree, So I had to replay some sessions in that. But there I really got to know the Holy Spirit. I remember the one evening we were walking to church. I was a bit backslidden in my first and my first year. After the Air Force year. Just so many girls all of a sudden on the campus, having come from the Air Force, was really difficult for me. But in that, so I'm making a joke now, but in that, seeking approval and acceptance. Because although I had a dad who taught me about structure and order and discipline and how to live well, I had such an ache in my heart just to know, am I good enough? That question, do I have what it takes? Am I lovable? Like, is it cool? And I remember just all the girls, you would, play just until she likes me. I would flirt with her until she likes me, until I have her. And then I'm like, So I had a bad name in the res because of that. And Magriet lived through all of that as my friend. We were friends back then for 7 years anyway. So it was nogal rof geweest. My girlfriends had conversations with Magriet. And later when I came to Jesus again in church, the same thing. But all I wanted was from the ladies that you're a man, and all I wanted from leaders, male leaders, whether it be the lecturer, whether it be the pastor, whether it be the captain in the Air Force where I was working, as in the holiday times, it's just, I just wanted approval from them as a young man. I was seeking approval and acceptance. And then, the Lord really sorted that in a big way for me, but there was still that ache in my heart, that uncertainty. Then, so varsity days, that's where I got involved in church ministry, and just like when many of you students went on outreaches around the country, we've got 1 or 2 cool stories about outreaches around the country, 6-week outreaches around South Africa. And there was amazing, profound moments with Jesus, the Lord, the Savior, and amazing fellowship with the Holy Spirit. Just participating in God's mission was really amazing. And I remember going up to Pretoria and starting to work in the Air Force, 2001. Started to work, and Magriet went the same year to study medicine. She'll tell a story now. But we went up together, or separately but together at the same time. And there was a prompting. We were starting to pray. We were in a church there, a great church, but the Lord started speaking to us about church planting so we started praying and talking to the people in Stellenbosch. It was the first shofar plant apart from this Tygerberg campus one. And we were praying and thinking and going through it. Remember, I was still studying postgrad engineering at Tix in that time, and taking a trip because we just started dating. Eventually, I kissed Magriet. And I liked it, I kissed the girl and I liked it. And then I'm like, hey, jy's nie net 'n goeie vriendin nie. You're not just a friend, you're beautiful. And we went on a trip to her oma and to a friend of ours and to my parents. And I was unsettled for about 2 or 3 weeks, wrestling with God. I know that Jesus loves me and saved me. I know that I'm saved. I know I've experienced the grace of the Spirit. But the big wrestle for me was, I've had this ache in my heart about a father, just this wrestling with God about the Father. And I had a massive, profound meeting with Jesus during a storm in Kerbomstrand, on the way to Stellenbosch. Just a massive, profound storm. And I just had the settling that God says that I am your father. It really sounds like Luke, but he said Ross anyway. But I heard but God said that I am your dad. And it sort of settled a hole in my heart that I had at that time. Really a profound settling. A while before that, actually, I had another massive meeting with the Lord saying to me, I was so uncertain about myself and I lacked confidence. I lacked confidence in many ways. And very uncertain as a young man. And then I had a wrestle with the Lord because I was appointed as the leader of this outreach team. And I was like, oh God, I'm so small and I don't know how to do this. I had one of those Gideon moments with the Lord. And then the Lord just loudly in my room had a confrontation about Genesis chapter 1 with me. And he said, Ross, lead that. He said, you said, let there be light. And then the Lord sort of stood in my face. The Father stood in my face and he said, Ross, you are a leader. I'm making you a leader. And it's like you could say it to me now, but there was a moment that changed my self-perception forever. And a moment after that, the Lord just, sometime later, the Lord just spoke to me during the church plant days in Pretoria. And the Lord said, was uncertain about a decision, a move. And the Lord just said to me, hey Ross, I said, stretch out your hand, I'll be there. And it's sort of a confidence of God the Father being with me, God the Father approving of me, God being with me. After 6 years, Magriet finished the studies and we had to move. We moved to Tygerberg, landed in Tygerberg. So the church plant in Pretoria and the church plant in Johannesburg was strong, it was going really amazing. At some point I had to leave, let me tell this story. At some point I had to leave the Air Force. And obviously the Air Force also meant security in terms of a salary for me. But I had a bit of a burnout studying engineering postgrad, planting church, being married to this beautiful hot wife, and the church plant and the engineering thing. And it was a logic choice that I had to can one of the two. And I remember Magriet was on call as a student one evening in the fifth year, can't remember, 5th year.
You didn't can Magriet.
No, that's...
Okay,
yeah.
That was not the one of the two that you canned. Okay, no, I'm just checking.
No, she said, yeah, some of you might die. So I remember that evening, I remember the evening just having time with God. I was really tired. And I already made the choice in my head that I should end the engineering. And Magriet's parents, myself, my parents were obviously a bit worried because now you're going to go into a small church, like salary-wise, and you're going to leave your engineering stuff, your hele loopbaan. I was really doing well in the Air Force. And just in terms of career, I enjoyed it. I was doing well. And I just heard the Lord, and I was praying, and then the Lord said to me in the evening, I had a profound meeting with the Father being there, and he said to me, Ross, what do you want? So Magriet did mention this earlier. I picked up that Magriet's relationship with God the Father and God as a provider was wholly different from mine. I would pray and I had to wrestle, If you want provision, you have to fight demons and slay stuff, I had to shandai, do stuff. And she just asked, and it worked for her, And I remember that evening, because up until that point, and still for the years to come after that actually, the reality is, although I knew God as a father, I was living as an orphan. I had to do everything myself. If I don't do something, something doesn't happen. If I don't make it happen, it doesn't happen. The agency was more on my side than God's side. So there's a balance. So I remember that evening, because I was going to cancel that. And Magriet's parents were rightfully quite concerned because she was still studying. So we had a house and everything. And I remember that evening the Lord Father came to me and he stood in the room and he said, Ross, what do you want? And I was one of those good religious moments. Oh God, I just want to serve you and I want to be happy and I'll go wherever you... And the Lord says, Ross, that's what I'm asking you. What do you want? And I said, well, God, this today on the way home from the Air Force, I had a motorcycle and I drove there was a thunderstorm and my cell phone was in my pocket and it's dead. It's not a big thing, but my cell phone is dead. Can I have a new cell phone? And the Lord said, yes. And I was like, But there was a clear. The father said, and I'm like, okay. So I have this motorcycle thingy, and Magriet would appreciate a car. And she had a car, but she said there was a specific car that she wanted. And I said, no, I would a Ford Focus, 2-liter, without the with a hatchback, yeah. And Magriet likes that
Because
car.
it takes turns beautifully.
It fits her personality, anyway. And I just heard the Lord said, yes. And it was amazing. So that was the Thursday. So the Sunday we pitch at church. And someone comes to me with a box, a new Sony Ericsson box phone with up those days it was like hot tech stuff. And he says, he bought this for himself, but he just heard the father say to him that he should give this to me. And I'm like, wow, it's like no one has given me this expensive gift before. And then next moment, after the service, one of our other friends came and he said, Ross, me and my wife spoke, and we just feel that we have to give our car to you. And it was obviously the car I was talking about. And it's like, wow. So that's one of the things where just initiated by God in terms of God the provider, God the carer, God the one for me. I don't have to do it all by myself. But it still took a while. The next 10 years, coming to Tygerberg was rough. If I would look back at my 10 years in Tygerberg, from age 30 to age, so I turned 30 just before we moved out of Pretoria. Landed in a congregation here that was going through a tough leadership change. It wasn't a happy sight. So I was not the popular guy coming in. So there was a great leader leaving, and it wasn't a good stay anyway. But I think what characterized these 10 years, age 30 to age 40, the Lord said, reposition yourself. I had to study, I had to do some stuff. But it was rough. It was Magriet did pediatrics. She's going to tell a little bit of our story. Of the 2 kids and a few babies we lost, in the miscarriage. It was so I studied 2 degrees in that time. She studied diploma and pediatrics in that time. We planted 2 other churches in that time. Up until that point, my life was quite easy. Everything would come easy. I would really work hard, but things would come easy. And those were not the easy years. So I had the greatest leadership conflicts in my life in that time. Was verskriklik moeilik vir my gewees, at times. Really, really where I felt out of my depths. And in retrospect, so I had the most profound, so obviously in your deepest valleys, you have the most profound meetings with God, which is beautiful. So I had amazing meetings with God. But I think if I would make sense of these 10 years of my life, those 30 to 40, it would be just the Father initiating, proving and testing my character, testing who I am, and bringing me to the end of myself in several times in my life. And just Him being faithful in that time. We had an easy relationship until our second kid was born, and we were planting 2 churches, and Magriet was studying. So it was, and then we didn't have an easy marriage for a few years. It was delightful. She's nice. I like her. Maar sy is moeilik. And it was sy wat so moeilik was. Anyway, so it was amazing. I think my life story, Theo, you said adoption. My life story is really, God is the God of the fatherless. And He's my dad, and just Him making me a man, teaching me who I am, what I'm called to do, and giving me strength. Sorry for the long story.
That's a good story. Thanks for sharing, Ross. I have a question, and while both of you shared, it feels like God initiated. There were encounters that you experienced that you did not initiate, but God initiated. And we live in a time where being fatherless is rife in South Africa, and it's not just among the poor. You get absent fathers, you get critical fathers, you get even perfect fathers, in my view, that you still have father wounds because of those things, because of moments that didn't happen. Sometimes there are guys who have father wounds because of things that did happen, abuse or neglect or whatever the case may be. Then there are things that didn't happen where you had a longing to be affirmed or approved. And then God beautifully comes and He redeems. He brings His words of affirmation over our lives. He initiates. Now, I think you mentioned it to an extent, but just the encounter doesn't necessarily transform our circumstances. If there is someone here and we realize I need to be fathered by God, what can you initiate from your side? What is helpful? What have you found to be helpful in your life? I'm going to ask you first, Magriet, how you allowed God to father you practically in your life. How do you relate to Him as Father on a daily basis and allow Him to father you?
I think, first of all, it comes from that place where you really, you come to a place where you really accept that He is Father and that is His heart. And if you're not there, then you need to find it. You need to seek it. I'll tell a little bit more about some things later, but I've come to know in my life that I'm just reading again that story of Jacob and how he wrestled with an angel. And for long, it was really a weird story for me. But I think the things we really desire in life, we need to start not fighting against God, because that's not what that scripture says. It's fighting with God and holding on, literally like your life depends on it, until you get that blessing. So I'm pretty much there in my life. I'm very sure that God is for me, but life hasn't been easy. And the things that I've received, and even the promises that I've received, didn't come easily. I might share about that. But I've come to a place where I'm so desperate to know Him. And I'm so desperate to be known by Him. And I used to be one that said I didn't have big prophecies ever pronounced over me. I would be that one that I would go queue for stuff, if people were preaching, I would go queue. And they would just, when they come to me, they would just say, okay. I never received these profound moments or these profound things, and I was so longing for it. But when I prepared for this evening, looking back, I literally have a book full of meetings with God now, where I know that the Father spoke to me, for sure. I mean, there's nobody that can take that away from you. But none, like Ross said, none of those things just happened. It's in really desiring it. It's in seeking it. It's in the tough times. When I go through something tough now, I say, God, I'll go through this. Obviously, only my thing is, if you go, I'll go. That's my one thing. My second thing is, and God, when I'm done with this, I want to be changed. And I want to know what you did. So I think being more intentional about seeking God and being intentional about what you want from Him. If you like Ross, he might share, I might take your stuff now, but he's still working through some Father stuff, and he's doing it intentionally with a coach, with a book. Stuff don't just happen to you. I think you need to desire it so much that you're actually going to fight for it and hold on until you have a mark. Like Jacob, he limped from that day. You will never be the same, but you will know that God is your Father.
It's good.
So if for those who know me, so intentionality is sort of my thing in life. If you're going to go for something, you're going to go for it. You see the passion, you see the intentionality, discipline. I think the reality is I have to wake up to the awareness that God has been fathering me always, even before the moment that my dad passed away. So growing in awareness, so reflection, going through your life and conversation, and it's simple stuff, it's the simple things in life. But just growing up, going through and thinking through and talking through your moments. But I shared this a few times, but I have cultivated a daily devotional lifestyle, and with a few practices and a few things, it works for me. It doesn't work for everyone else, but I'm sure it will work for you, and I'm confident it will work for you. But just every single day, praying the Lord's Prayer slowly and seeing what bit stands out. Heavenly Father, good Father. Every single day, praying the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God, who is Father Almighty. And just in those two words, just to take your time, He's the creator and sustainer of all things, just slowly praying through that every single day, reminding myself in prayer about the significant words that God has spoken over me. Those two things that I mentioned earlier, every single day I pray and I say, God, you said to me that you are my Father. You said to me that I am a leader. And then a few things that the Lord said to me, which is a bit precious. And I would just pray through those disciplines, who I am. So reminding myself of the grace. I pray the blessing, the Lord's blessing every day. Just the Lord bless me today and keep me, makes his face shine upon me. But I converted to the Jabez prayer. So I pray that sort of thing. I'm not going to go, but just daily praying and saying, you are a father, I'm your son, bless me. And it helps me to cultivate, not just remind myself of what God has said, but it helps me to cultivate a mindset that I'm not alone, because that's something that I'm still wrestling with. I have a tendency to think that I have to do it myself, and the problem is, through my life, is that the people I relate to, you got to make it yourself as well. That's the problem that I have. So if I am one who has, I recognize that I'm not self-made, it's God's grace, but man, I don't, I'm going to do it myself and in my prayer. So I'm still being initiated by the Father that knows that, reminding myself and growing to the awareness that He is good and that all my life He's been good to me. Yeah, sorry Theo. That's my daily habits.
That's very good. That's very good. Yeah, perhaps. It's something that we perhaps can return to and talk about more if we have time in the end. I have a question burning for Magriet as well. Magriet, you said that you were a clown for a year. From clowning to medicine. That is quite a diverse jump.
Although there's a movie about it.
Clowning to medicine. Oh, Patch Adams. Yeah. And he was a pediatrician. That's amazing. That's a prophetic statement. But was that the plan all along? What happened in that year, and how did you end up in this direction?
So just quickly, or I'll try and make it short. So after matric, I went and did this year, and after that, I was already accepted at Stellenbosch University, and it was in that time that like I mentioned, I come from Namibia, so we switched to the Cambridge system in recent years. So coming to Stellenbosch, they didn't really know how to interpret our results, and things were a little bit up in the air, and there were some other reasons, but medicine was never on the cards. It was kind of maybe at the back of my mind, but I didn't believe that I could do it, and I wasn't set up at school or by anybody. I wasn't prepared that this is the way that I was going to go. So I arrived at Stellenbosch University, and they asked me, so what do you want to do? I'm like, well, I want to work with people. They're like, sure, social worker. I'm like, okay. Can we add something? So they added public management, which I didn't know what it was, and they added psychology. And I started all excited, and it was fine. And then I think halfway through the first year, or towards the end of the first year, we had to go to visit one of the families in Paarl, and then you had to write a report afterwards saying how it goes there. And I just going in there and observing the state that people were living in and how badly things were there, I was so extremely upset. I got out of there and I've immediately phoned Ross and I'm like, I can't do this. I have the utmost respect for social workers. I feel that we really need more of them and we need to strengthen them, and I really, really respect them, but I just felt that this wasn't the place I was called to, that this wasn't the way that I was supposed to interact with people. I felt powerless. I felt like hitting a wall. I felt like there must be more than this. And I started praying. I told my small group about it. They prayed with me. And I just had this thing that I must become a doctor. I must become a pediatrician. But I was studying BA, general. And so I went to my father and my mom and I told them. And they're like, okay, well, we'll support you. By then, my brother was already, he's, like I said, 3 years younger. He was already applying for medicine. Because that was just always the way that he was going to go, and he was set up for that. everything. And by the end of that year, we went on that Go tour that Ross just mentioned. And as I was dancing on the stage, just before I went up, my dad phoned me and said I wasn't accepted. I didn't get in. Yeah, and it was in Port Elizabeth, I think. And I got up there. We were still dancing that song, Take the Shackles Off My Feet. And I was crying. The tears were running down my cheeks. And I was just dancing that song. And then I would go back and reapply makeup. And then I would come on. And I'm like, God, but I was so sure that this was what you were saying. And then went into the next year. Still carried on with my studies. And then prayed. And then one day I was just looking through a Time magazine that my dad gave me. And there was this picture of a father dressed in as a doctor, and a son and a daughter. And I'm like, well, there's already two of them, because my brother then got into medicine. And I'm like, oh, there's already two of them. There's just one missing here. And I just felt the picture speak to me, and God saying that this is a promise. This is where we're going to go. So we kept on applying until my dad phoned me one day and he said, can't believe it, but I got accepted. And every year we tried, people would just say, but you've got BA, there's no way. There's just no way. Not at any of the universities. You're welcome to come and try, but, it's not going to happen. Then we ended up in Pretoria together. And it was just so amazing studying and being on this course that you've been waiting for so long. And every year, at the beginning of the year, I was called into HR, and I had to go, please explain why it says BA. And is it not a typo, because it doesn't say BSc? So every year, I went back for 6 years to explain myself of why it's BA. And I'm like, well, you accepted me, I'm here, I'm passing, I'm just going to carry on. So that was the first really, really tough thing in my life. It coincided with Ross and waiting for him. So I've basically most of the important, really big things in my life, I feel like didn't come easy. It was a wrestle. I've had promises, I had words from God, but I had so many other naysayers, voices from the side saying no. Even with marrying Ross, I had close friends come and tell me, no, he's not your husband, you don't work, you're not suited to each other. And I'm like, but I'm so convinced of what God said. I've got this word, I've got this feeling. Even tried to pray the feeling away a few times, And then we both went to Pretoria at the same time. At that stage, we were like, I went to one side of Pretoria and he went to the other side of Pretoria. And lo and behold, we pitched up at the same church. And then we're like, without speaking to each other, we've both felt that this isn't the church for us. And then we went to another church the next Sunday without speaking to each other, and we looked very different in that church. So we were one of the 4 people looking differently in that church, because it was an international church. And there's Ross. And I'm like, oh, there's Ross again. Anyway, so God kept on giving words. And I kept on, it was still very sore, and it was a very long road. And then things finally worked together, and God made it work together. But the same with children. I had gynaes tell me that I'm not going to have children. And then we had 2 miscarriages. You start doubting God. You really start doubting the words that you receive, and it really becomes difficult to keep on praying and to keep on hoping and to keep on believing, and even with pediatrics. So it was a longing in my heart for a long time, but now I'm a pastor's wife. I've got children. I had a very, very nice job, that there was nothing wrong with that job. And then I went to the one meeting after the other, and I remember the one specifically sitting in a big meeting, provincial meeting, and I just didn't have a voice because I didn't have the right degree. And once again, I had that powerless feeling that I had in Paul so many years ago. Like, Lord, is this it? Surely there's more. And then somebody brought me a part of a book, and I really wish I could find that book again, where the story goes about trusting God and reaching for the things that you think aren't reachable, or going the extreme, or being fearless was type of the idea. And they tell a story of, if you're putting your child on a high bench or a high table, and then asking them to jump, and how if they jump into your arms, you as a parent, you feel so loved. And you feel it's the most amazing feeling to receive that trust from somebody, and how that is actually worship to God. So I said to God that day that this is what I'll do. I'll jump, because He knows. And He gave me a few other words after that. And then finally, and I got into pediatrics. So it was just, I actually just want to encourage you with it. If you have a word from God, to actually pursue it. To pursue it with friends, with like-minded people, to pray about it, to not just accept what is said. If doctors say something or people say something, really check it with other people. And if it still resonates in your heart, to really ask God. Not once did He not answer me. He answered me every single time with simple things, with scriptures, with Time magazines. I actually had dreams. I had scripture. He never left me. He never left me to wonder. There was also always a clear direction from His side.
That is awesome. Magriet, perhaps a final question for you. A couple of years ago, we sat around a table at a small group and we spoke about the words and dreams that God has for us. And I remember you saying, but my dream is, and then you mentioned your current job. And and it's just wonderful to see God being faithful. And I think, many people I know, they would run away from what you're embracing because you feel called to it. Tell me what it's like now, and what is God dealing with you where you are at?
So I think one of the things I had to come to terms with is being comfortable in the discomfort. Because actually I would really like to sit on a stoop and drink coffee in the Karoo. Actually, I would like to lie on a beach in Mauritius and go hand up for the next cocktail and the next cocktail. I mean, that would suit me just fine. And there are really times where you get to that point where you're like, is it really worth it? Luckily, I have this clever husband here. I was once again struggling with him, with God, and because now you arrive, not with Ross. Now you arrive here in this promised land, finally, after really struggling to get there. Now you arrive there, and there are these massive giants, and you're like, I don't even have the power to look at them. I don't want to go. I just want my stoop. And then Ross says, but every time you're going to arrive in the promised land, there's going to be giants. I was like, that's really, sometimes I tell him to switch off his pastor's voice. I just don't want to hear it. Just speak normal stuff. So like I mentioned before, so the last 4 years was extremely tough. Studying pediatrics with 2 children, with a husband that also decided to study things at that time, and at full church. It takes a sacrifice. I would sit in the one cell group after the other group just crying. And now Debbie was there the one time. He didn't know what to do with me because he'd never seen me like that. And it's tough. It's not nice. There's nothing nice about it. The sacrifice takes from you. It takes friendships. It takes your time. It takes your energy. It really actually makes you physically ill. At one stage, I looked at Ross and I'm like, I don't think there's anything left of me. I've sacrificed so much for this. Is it really worth it? And I asked God this last year, since I've completed everything, I asked Him to please, I don't want the time to be wasted, like I said before. I don't want to have gone through this sacrifice and not, I want to see what you did. Please show me what you did. And complete what you started. I'm now recovering, but please come build in the last bits. And God has really shown me, He showed me, I like to think in pictures, so God often speaks to me that way. But He showed me like a horse racing down a track with these eye floppies, what noem jy dit? Patches. Because I'm a big picture thinker, like you just heard. I dream big, I think big, but I want the whole picture. And then I want to plan and I want to know where I'm going. Obviously, that has never worked for me. So God showed me this horse, and he's racing down this track, and he can really see this much, but it's enough. It's really enough because he knows his rider. He knows he won't steer him wrong. And as long as he's actually in touch with the reins and with the bit, and he can actually sense what's going on, and he can hear his rider say, go, this much is enough. So I've really come to the place where I'm comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm comfortable where it's tough. No, I can't say that. I still hate being uncomfortable. But I've come to a place where I'm okay with it because I know the feeling now. I've been uncomfortable with God so many times that I'm actually okay. Because I know my rider. I know where I'm going. It's like an airplane coming to land. I can see the next light. There's just enough information to keep on going. And it's really something that I thank God for that I'm growing in, because it gives you endurance. It gives you the ability to stand and to go another mile. And so that's basically where I'm at.
It's wonderful thing of faith, the picture of faith, to hold on to what God had promised, and even though you do not see, and obeying, even though you do not know the outcome. That's wonderful. Ross, in closing for yourself, what is the Lord currently dealing with you, and where do you experience Him working presently?
Theo, thanks. So you heard that I'm more of a... When I started in ministry, I thought of myself as a pioneer and a church planter. And we've seen fruit in that, and I've done that for a long time. But I think the last 4 years, since I turned 40, my eyes have lifted from focusing on building a church community and ministering to people inside the church, primarily or only. And it's really, and you heard it in my voice when I speak and when I preach and when I pray, I really believe that God is initiating and is working in me, and He's inviting me into a partnership with Him, from no longer being just a young man that only looks after my own family, but to participate with His work in the world. And it sounds like words when I say it, but it's a deep sense of conviction that God is inviting me to pursue the peace of the city, to seek the peace of the city, to look bigger than the small bit of redeemed people here, but to really see how can the kingdom of God come into the church. And it's an invitation that moves away from a pastor-manager type of person. I'm not going to change my job necessarily or anything. I have no ambition or desire to do that. But really to keep my eyes focused and to seek the peace of the city. How can, by the grace of God, I and we participate with God's shalom, His wholeness coming to the city? That's where I am. It's and I'm excited about that.
It's awesome to hear and to see that, that it is something that I can see God working out in your life and through your life. In closing, I want to honor you guys. I had a conversation with two friends, Swen, one of them, and also a friend of mine who's in YWAM. And in the conversations we had, both of them was reading the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, a couple of times he was building the wall, and people tried to call him down from the wall and say, but come down, they want to talk. And every time he responded, I can't, I'm busy with the good work. And you know the story, people who also was opposed to what they were doing were saying things behind their backs, wat hulle gekoggel het, as die woord. And it was a costly thing for him to rebuild the wall, but he kept at it because he knew that is what God wanted. And if I think about both of you, there's something of a single-mindedness towards God's purposes. And that picture of the horse is a beautiful picture because I think that sums it up. I want to honor you guys for that because there's eternal reward in that. Yes, there are rewards that we receive now. I don't know. I didn't know could be a degree BA cocktail tasting in Mauritius. That would have been nice. I tried that for a few years myself, but it didn't end up going in that direction. Yeah, but I want to honor you guys for that, because others reap the seed that you guys have sown in this congregation, but even wider than the congregation, in individuals' lives. Sometimes I think there's a lot that you have sown, but you didn't have the joy of necessarily harvesting the fruit of what you had sown. But my prayer for you guys is that you would also experience that, because in the sacrifice, God, yeah, He's a good Father, and He desires what is good for us. So yeah, I thank so much for your willingness to share so openly. I think we can have another 3 sessions. I want to hear about those stories and missions that you had gone on, and a couple of other things that we would not necessarily ask on air. But yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate you guys, and the fact that you were willing to share with us. Yeah, next week we'll see you guys again. I think it's Dale and Karin next week that we'll see for another episode. So we're going to greet you guys, the online guys. We see you again next week for another episode of Storytellers. Thank you.